Let me get started then. So welcome everyone to this second Reactive online meetup. I hope you're all home. I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all not going crazy completely from this Corona weird times that we are in. I'm really excited that you made the decision to come here, stay ahead of the curve, and join this meetup. I hope it's going to be lots of fun for you, and you're going to find it interesting. My name is 𝗵𝗲𝗬𝗁. I'm currently the CMO of Vacuum Labs. And if you're wondering, what's this Vacuum Labs? Well, years ago, in 2015, it was actually Vacuum Labs which hosted and started one of the first ReactiveConfs. And we've been sort of in the back, helping out, helping organize, and really the team got created out of the space where Vacuum Labs was at the time. Vacuum Labs is really what we do is we provide software engineers to fintech projects, blockchain projects, online marketplaces, those sorts of things. And some of the ones you might know is Kiwi.com, which, I mean, you wouldn't be flying now, but normally you would be able to get really good prices and really good flights through Kiwi.com. We've worked with the Cardano Foundation on their wallet. And one of our most exciting projects is Mox in Hong Kong, which is one of the first virtual banks that we're building there. So doing lots of different things, and we've really been helping out Reactive from the very beginning, making it, of course, through Mickey, who was the biggest organizer from the very beginning, making it awesome throughout the whole thing. So I'm right now the CMO, but a few years back, I was a programmer. I was a developer. I don't think I was that great, so I just chose a path of helping those developers that are great get to the right client and find the right fit for what they do. And I'm so excited today to talk about, to welcome Max Firtman, who's going to be talking about progressive web apps, something that I remember way back in the day Steve Jobs started talking about. He didn't call them PWAs, but that's what they were. Thanks, Max, for coming on, and welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
So Max is a brilliant mobile and web developer. And when I sort of started, I haven't met you before, but when I started looking like, who's this Max? Like, you're the god of PWA, because all it was PWA Max. There's just like an endless stream of content, whether it's your stuff on Pluralsight, on LinkedIn, anywhere, you're just the god of PWA. So I'm so happy to have the god of PWA on this meetup today.
I'm not sure if God or devil. We'll see.
So just before we get to the talk itself, let me just small organizing notes to start off with. So we have the Q&A that is possible through the chat that you see on your left or right, depending on where you're looking. Please ask any questions. We're going to get to a Q&A session after the presentation. Maybe if there's something really urgent, we might jump in, but in general, the goal would be to let Max go through the entirety of his presentation, and then we go to the Q&A session. And after, if you still have questions or there are things that come up a little later for you, feel free to go into Slack. Our Slack channels are sort of full of conversations, and let's continue the conversation afterwards. So Max, I'm just gonna let you get started. This is your stage.
Cool.
Go.
Thank you, Marcel. Well, hello, everybody. Let me share my screen so we can start with that. 1 second. There we are. So this is going to be uncovering secrets of PWA with React. So as Marcel said, my name is Maximiliano. I can go by Max. I know it's a long name. I'm Firt on Twitter, F-I-R-T. So it's simple, 4 letters. I have around 40-45 minutes of content here. So if you already know what the PWA is, you will find some part that's kind of boring. So I will do an intro because there are a lot of developers out there not exactly knowing what the PWA is. I'm not going to get too theoretical about that. And even if you know what the PWA is, I'm pretty sure that you will find some new information about new platforms or new features that are available today that might be helpful. And after that, I will start talking about some secrets. So if you are doing React applications, some things that you need to understand and do to actually have a good experience. So that's the idea. So let me go jump directly. So I've been a web developer since this browser. So I've been doing web development for around 24 years, and also a mobile developer. So I'm also a native mobile developer, and now mixing both technologies, the web and mobile, to create, for example, PWAs. So I'm from Argentina. I'm currently at home in Buenos Aires, Argentina. This is not my home, by the way. It's a virtual background. And I'm typically, when there is no pandemic around, a frequent flyer. So I've been to 73 countries. No Slovakia, so I need to go there. And typically for trainings and conferences, I've written a couple of books, okay, from O'Reilly. I'm doing trainings and consulting all over the world on different technologies, mostly on mobile app development. And as Marcel mentioned, there are a lot of content that you can find on different libraries, O'Reilly, Safari, LinkedIn Learning, and even Pluralsight. And by the way, just small parentheses, two takes my PWA course for free, so no credit card, no nothing. If you want to get that course there, it's free for 2 more days. Only for April, that's why it's 2 more days. Okay, so PWAs, progressive web apps. Let's try to define what they are. And before that, if you're doing React, and maybe you've heard about the term, the PWA term, but you didn't actually develop the PWA. If you were using Create React App, so this tool to create your first app and of course compile and do everything in React, I'm not sure if you are aware that the template that Create React App is creating already has the PWA. So you were already creating a PWA, and this is not, maybe you're saying, oh, I knew that, or I didn't know that, but let me show you this. So there are big companies actually using Create React Apps for their apps. When you create an app, you will find a manifest file. It's a JSON file within your project. That looks like that. And if you don't change that, and there are a lot of apps out there that are not changing that file because probably they don't know what that file is for, you have this problem. So this is Feedback Assistant from Apple. So it's a new app. It's a React application using Create React application. You can find it on feedbackassistant.apple.com. That it's a PWA. And I think that they didn't know that, the web developers that did this, because even if you install the app, the name is React App. So it's the default JSON that came with Create React application. If you Google React App in the title for that JSON file, you will find thousands of apps out there with the default manifest JSON file. So that's a problem. So for React developers, the first suggestion here is like, please don't leave that file as it is, because it has no icon, or in fact, on iOS, it has no icon. On other operating systems, it's a React icon, and the name of your app will be React App. Okay. So let me try to define PWA. So this is a Net magazine from UK, but you can find it in Europe and US. Unfortunately, not here in Argentina. So I authored the cover article, and I really like the design of that article. So I'm not the designer of that, but so you can see that PWA is kind of the new DNA of the web. So I like that idea of the new or the current DNA of the web. So we're talking about PWA, actually about web is actually more important. So PWA is actually an open definition. So it's not completely clear what it is. Okay. It was originally created by Google, the concept, the name. I'm not talking about, so let's talk about the name, not about the concept, as Marcel mentioned before. The idea of PWA was first seen in a mobile device with Apple, with Steve Jobs in 2007. So he was presenting the idea of using web technologies to create mobile apps. When I'm talking about mobile apps, I'm talking about installed mobile apps that look and behave like other apps on the system. And that's a quote from Steve Jobs. So today, the concept, the PWA term, is embraced by most companies, not Apple, but it's embraced by Google, Samsung, Microsoft, Mozilla, Firefox, and many others. The only one that is not actually using the term is Apple. Okay. But that doesn't mean that PWAs don't work there. They work there with some differences, okay, but it's there. So a progressive web app is just an app built with web technologies, for example, React. That it should work fast while online or offline. So here comes a new part. So it should work offline as well. It can be installed on different platforms. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, some weird thing with the keynote. So it can be installed on different platforms. So that installation means that you have an icon. It looks like any other app in the system, and it appears like other apps. Okay, so the user doesn't actually know that's a PWA, it's just an app. And this is ideal for all those apps out there that just consume web content or web services. So if you have a mobile app, let's say a native app, or that is just downloading JSON from a web server or sending data to a web server, and there isn't anything more than that. And if you think about this, most of the apps are actually under this scheme, then PWA is the ideal platform because we are a web engine that is pretty good doing that. And if you're using Kotlin or Swift, and by the way, I'm also a Kotlin and Swift developer, so I'm not actually against or a native developer. I've been doing a lot of native apps as well. But at this point, it needs to deserve to actually go native, because most of the time we actually don't need that. It's just consuming web content or web services and just that. And PWA is actually pretty good for that. So a PWA is just a web app, for example, a React application. There is another layer on top known as service workers. I will do a quick intro/idea of service worker in a minute, and then a distribution channel. Okay, so I know that if you already know what the PWA is, you were expecting on that last layer web app manifest. I'm talking about distribution, and there are different ways to distribute a PWA. One is the web app manifest, that JSON file that I mentioned before. So typically, when we define that we want to develop some apps, we can use native SDKs, we can use web development. So these were like the typical two approaches to create apps. Even React Native is actually part of native SDKs. So with the native SDKs, we are compiling up for one specific device. With web development, we are compiling up for the browser. Of course, in the past 10 years, we also had hybrid development that was, for example, PhoneGap or 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗄. In this case, we were mixing native SDKs with web development, but we were targeting devices, specific devices, so Android or iOS or Windows or BlackBerry, rest in peace. Where is PWA here? Well, PWA is actually in the web development layer, okay, in the web development layer, but with a difference. Because it's in the web layer, it can actually run in the browser, like any React or web application. But it can also be executed as a native app. The native word here is weird, but it can act as a standalone app on specific devices. So that's the idea. Okay, so it will target the browser, but also different devices. And when we're talking about React, we can actually, if you're using React.js to create web apps, of course, you are in that web development side. But if you're using React Native, you can target React Native for web. And with React Native for web, then you can actually create a PWA. So these are the two places from React where you can actually create a PWA. There are many companies doing PWAs these days. More companies are appearing every day. We don't have enough information about how many apps do we have, but the only public information that I have is from Diego here from Samsung, that he said that on Samsung, over 20 million PWA installations happened in last year, over 80,000 domains. So 80,000 domains is roughly 80,000 PWAs, roughly. Okay, and this is just one browser, Samsung Internet Browser. That is not, of course, the most used browser on Android. So, but that's kind of the amount of PWAs out there. So there are many PWAs using React. In fact, I can bet that most of the apps PWAs out there are based on React. Of course, there is no need for that, but I mean, it's one of the most used frameworks for PWAs. So just to take some examples, for React.js, Twitter, and Starbucks, they're both React.js apps that are PWAs. And I have one that is pretty new. It's CoTrack. So that was developed here in Argentina. So it's an app for COVID-19, so to track users with their location. But anyway, they use React Native. So they have the iOS and the Android native apps from React Native, but they also created a React Native for web target. And you can go to that URL, it's in Spanish, m.cuidarnos.com, so take care of ourselves, something like that.com, and you can install it as a PWA on every platform, okay? And that's React Native for web. So it's an example of how you can create PWAs also with React Native. So let's talk a little bit about support. Today on Android, so here you have a video of the 𝗫𝐸𝐿conf website. So you can actually add to the home screen that URL, and that's actually creating a PWA on Android. On Android, can be installed on Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Samsung, UC Web, and even Microsoft Edge. Okay, so you can see there that after it was installed, it looks like any other app in the system, that 𝗫𝐸𝐿conf app. So I'm talking about that one. Okay, so after it was installed, it looks like any other app in the system on Android. On iOS, it's working on Safari, only for Safari. So if you are using Chrome on iOS, Firefox on iOS, that by the way, they're not Chrome and Firefox, you can install PWAs from iOS only. And also you have on mobile devices, support for 𝗫𝐤𝑆 or GeoPhones. These are feature phones that are actually available mostly in Africa and South Asia. They support PWAs. In fact, that's the only way to create apps for those devices. So these are the options for mobile devices. On iOS, for example, I'm not sure if you're aware of Tinder. Have you ever tried Tinder? Well, Tinder.com is a PWA, so you go to the website. It's a website, but then you click on share and add to the home screen. I need to update the video because now on iOS, the latest version of iOS, it's a different shit. And then it's a Tinder app that looks standalone, so it's not actually running in Safari. It looks like the Tinder app. Okay, this was actually what was created by iPhone OS 2.0 a long time ago. So that was presented by Steve Jobs. It's still today the same technique, but it was improved, so it's actually much better today. So on desktop, you can also install this on desktop. So you can install this, for example, on Chromebooks, Windows 10, Windows 7, Mac, and Linux. For example, here you can see the Starbucks application installed in Windows 7 as an app. So probably you're thinking, Windows 7, who cares about that? But think about the enterprise world. And if you're doing enterprise application, now you have another way. So also installation through the browser, in this case on Windows, doesn't need administrator permissions. So every user that can actually use Chrome or the new Microsoft Edge can actually install a PWA even without being admin on that particular device. And then you can have a desktop application, okay? Same here on Windows 10, okay, Trivago. You can install Trivago from desktop, and now you have the Trivago application running on Windows 10. The same on Mac, Linux, and Chrome OS. So it's also available on desktop. But installation happens on 6% of users. That means if you want to run the app with offline support and great performance, 93% of users browsing the web can actually have that PWA support. Okay, of course, 100% of users, or 90 something, in case you are not supporting all the browsers, can actually access your web app online while they're online only. But 93% can also access it offline and with great performance. And 86 can actually install that app. Okay, these are pretty big numbers. So in terms of who is actually supporting the PWA platform. Unfortunately, we don't have full support or plans from several browsers. For example, I think the most important part here, let me find this, is the web view on Android and iOS, because that's actually Facebook. When you are clicking on a link on Facebook on both iOS and Android, you are not rendering that app in the browser, that website in the browser, but within Facebook. That's using a web view. And there is no PWA support on that. So I think that's a problem. So if your React application is heavily based on social networks and links on social networks, that might be a problem. Okay, so this is one of the restrictions that we have today. So a PWA will have a couple of progressive features: basic web content, we will add installation, service worker, and hardware usage. Okay, and the experience will need to react to different environments, like being online, offline. We need to offer a good experience. The same code should deliver different level of quality. Twitter is actually doing this. The same Twitter code base runs on feature phones, on smart TVs, on Windows as a desktop app from the Microsoft Store, on Chromebooks, or on desktop. Of course, Android and iOS, right? And the same code base makes decisions about the experience that it's going to offer to actually keep the same quality, not the same abilities, but the same quality. And of course, we need a lot of new APIs that you need to learn to detect the environment and to act in consequence in terms of what you can do. Okay, so that was the intro to the PWA platform. So let's start talking about secrets. So secrets are, I mean, I'm not here like again like a god as were mentioned before, but secrets means that there are a lot of things that a lot of developers are unaware of, not because they're actually secrets, right? But so we're going to uncover these things that are really important for a good user experience when you're doing an app, because now your React app is not just running on the browser or in the server, it's running as an app in its own contained window or as a standalone experience. So that's why we need to understand the differences. Let's start talking about the app lifecycle. So today, when you load an app, I mean, you open a PWA, okay, the app appears, the app loads, okay? Then at some point, the app goes to the background. Well, there is an event there that you can bind to visibility change. But what happens in the background? What happens in the background? Is it still running? What happens if I have a timer in my React application that is actually fetching email from the network every 5 minutes? Is that timer still working in the background? Have you ever thought about that? So what's going on here? Well, the answer is that typically no, okay, your JavaScript is actually suspended, okay? There is a point where the app will be suspended. And also you have a new event, a freeze event that is currently available only in Chromium-based browsers, but it's a 𝗷𝗲𝗲 API. It might appear on other browsers as well. That will let you know that the app will freeze. Okay, so in case you need to pause your timers, maybe you need to talk to your server, say, hey server, you know what? I know we have a session here going on, but the user is out of the app will be suspended, so let's stop this. And what happens if the user goes back to the app? If the app is still in memory, okay, that's one option. Nothing really happens. Okay, everything like restarts automatically. So that happens many times. I mean, you get out of an app, you go back, and the app is still there. Okay, but there is another option. Maybe, well, by the way, in this case, resume will be executed and visibility change. Okay, so there is a resume event telling you that, hey, we are coming back from a suspended state. And maybe a week has passed. That's not typically on a normal phone because you don't have too much RAM. But if the app is still in memory, it's because typically a couple of hours have passed and you haven't used the phone a lot. But a lot of time has passed, and maybe you don't want to restore the app as its previous state. Maybe you need to do something else. I mean, if it's a home banking app, you probably want to log out the user. You don't want to keep that user logged in after 5 hours. There is another option. The option can be that the app was discarded. For example, you open the camera, okay? You are recording a video. You are doing something really heavy that needs memory. So in that case, but the user goes back to the app, and the app will start from scratch. Your PWA will start from scratch. In that case, the normal loading process will be fired, but now there is a Boolean attribute in document. Document was discarded, that will tell you the idea if the user is starting the app from scratch, or is actually coming from a previous session that was discarded from memory. And in this case, you can actually restore the state. I mean, if you're doing Redux or you're using state hooks, you can actually find a way to restore the states of your components or the state of your app to actually provide a good user experience, okay? So that's the lifecycle. Unfortunately, this is actually not working on iOS. And on iOS, it depends on the version. Fortunately, today it's much better, but the lifecycle can be like this. I'm not expecting you to understand this graph. It's not for, this is for 13.0, so now it's much better in the current version. But anyway, for iOS, at least the recommendation is to provide a reload action within your UI. So a button, okay, a reload that will just do JavaScript reload. Because there is no simple way to reload your app, typically. Of course, provide full navigation from gestures, because on iOS, we don't have a back button like on Android, physically or virtually always visible. The lifecycle is a good candidate for a React hook, to create your own custom hook to actually manage the lifecycle. So I have some ideas. You can then decide per component with a hook, the state that if you want to reset the state or update the state after that discard. So after that, the app was discarded from memory. Also, you can have a hook or the same hook that can calculate the time passing between sessions. So you can make better decisions about what you want to do with your experience after 1 minute or after 5 hours or after a month. Also, you can use this to do some smart detection on iOS. There are some tricks that you can use on iOS to detect when the user gets out and goes back. So these are some ideas, okay, for you to implement on React to actually provide a better experience. There is also something that is not well known out there. So there is a persistent storage API that, as you can see, is pretty simple. It's just one line, navigator.storage.persist. And that you should be very careful just to call this API only when it's available. So that's why you have the conditional first. This is a good candidate for adding this to a PWA config component if you want to have one, or somewhere in the top level logic when the React app starts. And let me explain what this is. By default, the contents of your app won't be there in the user's device forever. So if on Android, for example, if on Android you have a storage pressure means that there is no more space available, the browser, in this case Chrome, that is in charge of the PWA, might delete data from a lot of apps. And maybe you're not expecting that because you say, oh, but it's a PWA, it was installed. I'm expecting the contents of that app to be offline always. Well, if you want to do that, you actually need to ask for it. And you ask for it with this line, okay? Navigator storage persist. If you don't explicitly ask for this, it's not going to work. The API will grant you access to this when the site is bookmarked, in this case of a website. If the site has high site engagement, so if the user is coming to your website in the browser every day, or if the site has been added to the home screen, so it was installed as a PWA. So that means that if the user has installed your app as a PWA and you ask for persistent storage, it will be granted, at least on Chrome-based browsers. That today 80% of the users anyway. Also, if the user has push notifications, enable. So if you ask for permission and the user granted that permission, you will also be granted persistent storage. Okay. Cool. Remember that if you have any questions, you can start putting the questions in the Q&A panel, and we will answer those later. So let's talk a little bit about platform integration. So how can we integrate with the platform? Because we're actually doing apps for devices now, not just for an agnostic browser. Or we're actually doing apps for an agnostic browser, an agnostic platform, but also for specific devices. So we want to like integrate our app into the ecosystem, so the user will find that app like part of the phone or part of the desktop computer. So one thing that you can start doing is web authentication. With web authentication, you can actually log in your users or authenticate your users. Pretty simple. So in this case, here you have the example of 1-800-Flowers.com. You can just go to the app, the PWA, log in, and it will appear using my Gmail account, and I can just click continue as Maximiliano, and I'm logged in, even if I don't have an account there. Okay, so the user doesn't need to fill any form, so it's actually pretty simple and pretty fast. Okay, you're done, and now you are logged in. Also on iOS, now you have a sign in with Apple.js. And when you are using this library, this is a JavaScript library, when you're using this library, you will be able to log in the user with one click as well. And it will use Face ID or Touch ID on different devices from your PWA. So that's something interesting that you can use. PWA Builder, it's a suite of tools from Microsoft, open source tools from Microsoft. They are available at PWAbuilder.com. I will mention PWA a couple of times. They have a PWA auth web component that we can actually use in React. So it's already built, so we just need to import the JavaScript library, the web component library, use the PWA auth tag, set some keys, and that's all. And it will look like this: sign in with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, or Apple. Okay, so that will help the user to log in and the auth process that sometimes is tricky on PWAs. So another way to integrate your React application within PWA, the platform, is the Web Share API. With the Web Share API, you can share content from your app to other apps. You are integrating into the ecosystem of your mobile phone or of your desktop. By the way, that's my phone. So you can actually integrate your content there. And it's pretty simple. It's navigator.jr. You pass JSON with some data. That's all, right? This is working on Android and iOS and also on desktop. So on desktop, there are not so many share ecosystems, so it depends on the OS. But this is more very useful on mobile devices. So the Web Share API, this is the Twitter PWA on iOS. So you can see it's opening the share sheet, the native share sheet on iOS. Okay, so and the same happens on Android as well. So this is a candidate for a web share component. Okay, so I mean, you can create your own component that will actually call this API. Okay, so that's interesting. Another way, this is an automatic way actually to integrate to the OS. It's known as 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄. And the only important part that I have here is that I need you to be aware of 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄. 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄, it's a system right now on Android that it started with Chrome that will generate an APK. An APK is actually an Android package. It's an Android native package. It's an Android native app. So instead of you compiling your own app with 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄, it's going to be created by Google in the cloud. It's going to be signed by Google, okay? So that means that when you have 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄, your app will appear as any other app. You can see, okay, it appears in the settings as an app install. Even there is a fake data here. It says that the app was installed by the Play Store, which is actually false because it wasn't installed by the Play Store. But because it was signed by the Play Store, the phone actually thinks it comes from Google, from Play Store. And Samsung also has 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗄 when you're using Samsung Internet Browser with a Samsung device only, okay? That will work only if the PWA criteria passes. So if you have the manifest, if you have the service worker, if you have all the components that you need, it will be a full Android native package with, it will contain only the app's name, the icon, and the URL, just that, okay? So it won't contain your React bundles, okay? It's just the name of your app, the icon, and the URL. The APK will be installed silently, okay? So that means that the user will don't understand. The user will not actually understand that there is an installation from the Play Store going on. The icon will go to the home screen and the launcher, and this is available on Chrome and Samsung Internet. Okay, so that's 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗂. On Android with 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗂, your icons will appear everywhere, as I mentioned before. So you will see your icon on all the places where typically Android icons will appear. And one important thing is that by default on Android, you will have 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗂 link capturing. So within the OS, your PWA will capture all links pointing to your PWA scope, meaning that if you have twitter.com as your PWA and you receive a link on WhatsApp going to twitter.com, that link won't be open in the browser. It will be open in your PWA, or at least it will be one of the possible apps. Okay, so if you have a PWA and then you're sending emails to your user pointing to links to the same domain or the same, let's say it's a scope, it can be a domain or a folder in the domain, your app will actually render that content and not the browser. Okay, so be careful just with that. And also now you have batching available. So available on some platforms, and you can change it with push messages with normal chat, the number or a dot to the icon, like native apps. So I'm talking about this. I'm talking about .7 that you see there, or .2, okay, on Windows, or on Android, it can be just a dot, okay, something like that. So you can actually set that in your PWA icon from JavaScript, okay? So that's also something new available for PWA. And finally, we have desktop window management, which means this is Google Drive. On Google Drive, this is a PWA, by the way. You can go to File, New Window on the Mac, for example, or Linux, and you can open more windows of your PWA. So now you can have, it's like different tabs in the browser, but now as a standalone apps. So even because we have Windows now, we can go back to JavaScript from 1995, and we can use these APIs that were actually pretty useless these days. Resize2 and Move2, they actually work on PWAs, on a standalone installed PWA. So you can actually resize the window or actually organize the window or windows within the screen, okay, with that API. So, and you can actually add this to your PWA config component. So every time you start your app, it will start in the previous place or in the place or in the size that you actually want. And you can use the service worker as a place to actually communicate windows. So every window can actually communicate with other windows. And features look promising. For example, there is a new API that is coming that will let you create tabs. In this case, this looks like Google Drive, Google document in different tabs. Okay, and it's currently available as an experiment in Google Chrome. It's called Desktop PWA Tab Strips. So if you want to play with that, it's currently available. And this is an example of a Twitter experiment, the Twitter PWA experiment with tab strips. And now we have foldables coming, okay? So foldable devices with different screens. Well, there is a spec coming. If you want to look for it, it's the Windows Segments Enumeration API that has a CSS part with media queries and also a JavaScript API that will let you specify what you want to render on each screen, okay? On iOS, unfortunately, when you look at iOS PWA, as Marcel mentioned before, the first three results are actually my articles, okay? So the first one, the second one, and the third one. And even the snippet that you hear here is part of another article that I brought. So what I'm saying here is that this problem, unfortunately, that Apple is not changed. So Apple is not actually making any documentation on their own platform, which is a problem, okay? So I will always say, many times, I said this many times, Apple, shame on you, right? I don't want to be your official documentation, okay? Anyway, okay, so I'm actually trying to see here, installation UI, there we are. So the web app manifest is the one that will let your React application has those install buttons on many places. So install on desktop, or different icons that will let you install the app, okay? Warning for React devs, don't use the default manifest. I already mentioned this, don't use the default manifest. Understand and set all the properties, that's really important. Create icons for each platform, for iOS, for Android, different icons, not just one icon, it doesn't work like that. On iOS, you need to actually add icons and splash screens to actually have a good experience. Just Google that to actually get more info. And now, this is important, you need to add masked icons for Android. What is this? By default, you can see icons if you don't add mask icons from Android 8, that is currently 25% of the Android users, you will see things like this. Your icon will appear under a circle or a different shape, okay? But it doesn't look like a nice icon. So that's how now you can create a maskable icon. You can go to maskable.app. That's a web app that will help you with this. You create an icon with a safe area, okay? And then different Android devices will, using different shapes, will actually use that safe area, and they won't shrink your icon into a circle or into another shape. So it will look like real icons. So there are many PWAs actually using this, so time for you to actually go and add this. Okay, so the installation UI is that install button, okay, that you see there. So this is actually a candidate for a React component. There are a lot of examples out there on how to do that. There is an event before install prompt that you need to listen for. Preventing default, you will save that event for later, and then you call prompt. Okay, this is not a training, so I'm not trying to explain everything here, but this is a candidate for an install component. Okay, we can go back if the event is not fire, for example, because it's iOS. When iOS is not going to be fire, you can hide the button, or you can offer manual instructions when clicked. Like for example, on iOS, it will be, it will be go to share, add to home. On desktop, it will be menu, install. Go to the menu, install. And on Android, it will be go to the menu, add to the home screen. Okay, so these are like some explanation of how to do that. Remember PWA Builder that I mentioned before? Well, PWA Builder is also creating a PWA install web component that is completely JSX compatible. Okay, it's called PWA install, and it's open source. Okay, cool. Good. So let me see how we're doing with time. I think we need to start moving on. So I'm going directly to one of the most important parts for me, that is app distribution. There are many things, okay? I can be here for hours. But today, you can distribute your app in the browser, in the enterprise world, and in the App Store, okay? On all distribution models, we are not changing how the resources of the app are being installed and updated. The service worker is responsible for that on every possibility, okay? It's always the service worker. Today, we can create native apps that we know how to do that, hybrid apps, and PWA launchers, and that's new, okay? So a PWA launcher is one of the three ways that we have to distribute an app. So we have a web app, a React application, a service worker, and we're going to create a launcher. And you say, launcher, what's that? It's just a package, an empty package, that will launch your PWA in a standalone mode on different versions, so on different operating systems. So the launcher will contain the icon and the name, metadata, the start URL of your PWA. That's all. No resources will be stored here, okay? And then you can use the App Store, because some users will look there, you want to increase reach, and you want to use some native features not available on the web, okay? Today we have several, I don't know why that icon was there from the beginning, but several stores compatible with PWA launchers, like the Google Play Store, the Samsung Galaxy Store, Microsoft Store, and the 𝗫𝐬e Store. So these stores are actually compatible with PWA launcher. So in this case, the same PWA that you created for the browser can be wrapped in a launcher, and you go to the store. And then the user will open the app and it will look like any other app in the store. The user will never know it's actually PWA or web-based, okay? There are many ways to do this. I will try to show you just the simplest way to do this. So here you have an example here of an app that was highlighted by Google. It's called 𝗬𝗚𝗚, okay, 𝗬𝗚𝗚. So you can see it's just less than 1 megabyte in the Play Store. Okay, it has a good rating, better compression, increment, blah, 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 blah. So it works like a real good app, and it's just a PWA. I'm not sure if that's React or not, but it can be. There is no reason not to. And for Samsung, today, if you want to publish a PWA in the Samsung Play Store, you just need to send an email. It's kind of a manual thing today, but it's there. And now Google is also replacing Android apps in Chrome OS with web apps. So that's new from the last week. So now if you have a Chromebook and you go to the Play Store and download Twitter, you're not actually downloading an Android app. It's actually installing the PWA, okay? If you want to create, without getting too technical, we can get technical later in Slack if you want, or in the Q&A. You can, if you want to create one app launcher for Android, for the Play Store, after you have your PWA published, you can go to PWA Builder. That's one solution. Another one is okay. So you give the URL of your PWA, and it will give you an APK, an Android package. And for Apple, it's only available for enterprise distribution, okay? But you can actually create web clips with the URL of your PWA, and you can distribute to your enterprise users for your company, your PWA. And then on users' devices, the icon of your PWA will appear. So I think that's actually pretty cool. Just have in mind, and I'm finishing with this, that you should be very careful because not every PWA can be in the store. For example, one of the most distributed PWAs today is that one. I'm not sure how many of you recognize that logo, that YP. That YP logo is the PWA for YouPorn. A YouPorn is a PWA, okay? And of course, they cannot be in the App Store, okay? Because the App Store has some rules. In fact, this was from this week, from yesterday, in fact. So someone saw that their PWA in the Google Play Store was rejected because it was an app for kids. It was kids gaming or apps for kids are not actually allowing you to use a website or a PWA content. Okay, so the App Store has some rules. So check the store rules. Okay, if you want to distribute your app, your React app in the stores. Okay, so the last thing I have for you is that not every app should be a PWA. Okay, I'm not saying that, but there are a lot of apps that should be a PWA. I created a Twitter account for that. Should be PWA. So sometimes I'm tweeting about some apps that I see in the market that are currently not PWAs, but they should be, and I try to explain why it's better. And I think that was all. Just a reminder that in 2 more days, if you want to get my free course on Pluralsight. I think I'm done. Thank you. Now we can go over Q&A. Marcel, do you want to take over?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. So we have 5 questions directly in the Q&A.
Cool.
So let's run through them. I think you partially answered all of them, but hearing them in context of the question is probably going to be helpful for the people who ask. So Daniel is asking, the offline requirement has always made me curious. Does it mean that, for example, a chat app can never be classified as a PWA?
Okay, that's a good question. So the answer is that think about a native chat application. Think about WhatsApp or Telegram. So you open Telegram and you don't have connection. You open WhatsApp, you don't have connection. You don't see from the system saying that that is not working, like there is no connection. The app appears, okay? So the app reacts. So what you actually need is that your app should react, okay? So how? It depends on the app, to be honest, okay? So, but the app should react with its own user interface. And that part is offline. then you make the business decision of which features will be available while offline, okay? But it's up to you. But at least you actually need content served from your app when it's offline. I think you're mute, Marcelo. Oh, no, I'm not hearing you for some reason.
Ooh,
okay, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, please feel free to add an additional addendum. This is a curious one for me. So it's a sort of a sentence phrases a question, I guess. So it will be an asynchronous chat app when the connection drops off.
So I'm not sure if I understand the question, but let's see this way. There are some platforms, for example, desktop and Android mainly, so not iOS, where you can actually run code in the background, even if the user is not actually using your PWA when the connection restarts. So your chat PWA application on Android and desktop can actually send messages in the background, even if it's not actually, even if it's frozen right now, okay? On iOS, you will only be able to send those messages that are pending when the user goes back to the app later. Mm-hmm. So there is a restriction there on the platform.
Yeah, I guess this has to do with the entire potential functionality of being asynchronous. So you might lose your connection for something. You might use the app for a little bit. It uses.
So there is an API, exactly. There is an API that is on top of Service Worker known as Background Sync that will let you actually send messages or receive messages in the background to sync the data in the background. So it doesn't matter if the user is getting out of the app. So it's not actually part of the life cycle of the app. So if the user is getting out of the app, as we mentioned before, that messages in the background sync API will also be fired. And now we have also periodic sync API with users permission. You can actually execute some code in the background every morning. Yeah. So update your app or update your content with users permission that way.
Of course. So it actually brings it very close to what a native app would normally be doing, say, in the background or
there is a let me also tell you this. The Chromium project, okay, has its own vision of the future of the web. There is a project known as Fugu, the Fugu project. Okay, Fugu, F-U-G-U. The Fugu project, the idea is to bring every native capability into the web and the PWA platform. So they're adding new APIs every month based on that idea, that every capability should also be available with security and privacy, blah, 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 but they should be available on the web as well.
Okay, cool. So another question from Daniel K, assuming it's not a different K in the last name. So assuming I don't need app stores and some mobile specific API, would you recommend PWA as a cheap option for developing such app? Or do you think real native app has some important benefits?
So regarding cheap, so I mean, comparing to the idea of creating two native apps, iOS and Android, probably is cheaper. But it's not so cheap creating a good PWA because you need to create a good PWA. That means performance, user experience. It's not just, wow, it's because it's a website, no one is doing Q&A. I don't care, okay? Because if not, the user will not actually use your PWA. Yep. So a PWA should actually be performant, and that needs some work and some experience. So I'm not sure it's also cheap. So what I see as when we should be using PWAs and when we shouldn't, I think it has to do with ability. So if your PWA can be created with the PWA platform, then it should be created with the PWA platform because it will be available everywhere on every platform. But yeah, if you have performance issues because I don't know, you're doing something really weird and you actually need, but now you have also WebAssembly. So even when you say I need native code, native performance, you can actually have WebAssembly now that is like as fast as it can be. So there are a lot of situations where PWA is a good platform, and there are a lot of situations where it's not. So again, I'm not saying like it's the only tool that we have.
Yeah. So the question was asked with sort of quotes in it. So cheap as in is it a cheap option? But sure,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So I guess this is with building anything, you always hear like there's a cheaper version, but really the cheapness is coming out of you're moving the cost somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So next one is from Maximiliano Poggio. So to create a PWA with React, the approach is to use React Native for web or React Web for mobile. It's better to adapt mobile for web or web to mobile in a UI perspective. So are you starting from the web or are you starting from the mobile sort of end of React Web?
So, I mean, I think that you will use React Native for web only if you really need or want to create native apps for the stores, mostly on iOS, where you cannot publish your PWA manually. So you say, well, I do React Native for iOS and then React Native for web. And that's the only reason. So if you are if your focus is on PWA, I don't think you will start with React Native. Just use React.js.
Yeah. So just look at the question again. Like maybe it's the question isn't necessarily like, because it's what he's saying is use React Native for web or React Web for mobile. So
I think it's React.js versus React Native for web.
Yeah.
But again, it's like if you're going to create just PWAs, that you will have a lot of overload that I don't think you need or want to. You also have Flutter, for example, Flutter for web. It's also available and you can create a PWA with Flutter for web. But if you're a web developer and you're on the web side of the world, getting into that space just to create web content, you won't be too happy about it, I think. We are losing control, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So yet another question from Daniel, and this one's very simple. So can you share your slides, please? There was a lot of useful information mentioned.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can share it in my Twitter account, or I can share with the organizers. And
wonderful. And then probably in the Slack, we can also put it in there. So
yeah, sure.
Cool. And final question here is from Sergey. If we distribute the PWA via App Store / Google Play, how OS determines which browser engine to use? Okay, so if it's done this way, which one is used?
No, that's a good question. So I didn't explain that, but for going to the Play Store today with PWAs, there is a technology known as Trusted Web Activities, TWA, Trusted Web Activity. It started as something from Chrome only, so it started as a Chrome API, but now it's part of an agnostic protocol on Android. So it means that if the user has more than one browser supporting TWAs, so Trusted Web Activities, the user will receive, like the first time opening a PWA, it will be asked, which browser do you want to use? Which rendering engine do you want to use, or something like that, okay? Yeah. Just remember that it's not so common for end users to actually have more than one browser, okay? So it's not a common situation. It's more for us that we are testing and we have a lot of browsers. So today, it's mainly being open in Chrome. But as more browsers are supporting these technologies, they can actually be providers of PWA. So then it depends on the configuration of your phone. So if your home doesn't have Chrome and you have only Firefox, and Firefox is supporting Trusted Web Activities, then it will use Firefox.
Okay, so it's basically a user's choice of what they want to do, but it's fairly rare because most people will just use whatever's on.
Yeah, and it's also rare to find users that actually understand what's going on.
So this is a question here, but it's, as we're going through the presentation, I kept asking, so why isn't Apple really on board here? Like we see all these others, even like these tiny little new Nokia phones with KOS supporting it. Why is Apple so either problematic or just not using even the term PWA at all?
So I don't know. So I have I got a lot of articles on that. There's one, if you will, in 2020, I think the first results, my latest article on Medium. So where I collect a couple of things from Apple. So Apple has these two sides. Okay, the Safari team there is actually improving the technology behind the PWA platform. So slowly, but they're actually there, the service workers, okay, they're actually there. And the other side that is actually saying, no, you know what, we don't want the vision from Chromium, from Chrome, that we should enhance the web with more power. Okay, so PWAs are actually working on iOS, at least the basic, okay, it's working. Sometimes buggy, now it's much better than before. So it's always the question that there are a lot of people angry and developers angry with Apple because of this. So sometimes the feeling is like they want to help, but they have like PWA word is forbidden for them, something like that. So
yeah,
they, and every mention to that is like we don't actually want to do the same as Google. But it's also true that Google has a lot of power in the web today. So it's mostly, so if you take Apple out of the equation, you have only maybe Firefox with Gecko, but it's not really so powerful these days. There, even if it's not actually Chromium, for now at least, it's actually following Google. Okay, so it's everyone that is actually doing what Google says, and then it's Apple. So I don't have this anti-Apple view. Okay, so I'm angry with Apple because they're not doing the things that they should be doing. But also, it's important to have the balance and saying, well, on the other hand, it's also true that everyone else is doing what Google wants or Google is saying, and there is no real competition. So I don't know. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not an Apple employee, so I've been there doing trainings as a trainer, okay, in Cupertino. People is just people everywhere, where they're not that evil people, okay, working there. So, but yeah, their corporate ideas are different than from other companies, and they have their priorities, and they say this is not a priority for us, unfortunately, right? Yeah. So I don't know the reasons. So we can just guess, or we can assume, or we can discuss about the reasons, but we don't actually know for sure.
Of course. I mean, it's kind of a paradox, because really, like, the first time, you know, I already mentioned that, you mentioned that the first time sort of that vision was presented to the world was at an Apple conference, or by an Apple executive. So it's almost like, you know, the way they pulled out the disk drive of everything, you know, years before everybody else figured out like that might be a good idea to make the laptop smaller. They maybe just come in and then, you know, do what they want. So cool. Well, looks like we don't have any further questions on the Q&A nor the chat. I think Daniel only pointed out that there's a website called whatwebcando.today, which I think you also mentioned in your course. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what that website does.
Oh, there are a couple of websites. So I didn't mention that one as far as I remember, but so there are a lot of websites that just a list of features, okay, that will tell you like green, yellow, or red per feature. Okay, so you know if it is safe to use, or maybe, yeah, maybe this is working only on Firefox for Android, and you say, oh, it's just 0.5% of the users. So yeah, it's there, we can play with it, but it's not actually ready for production. So this website will give you that idea of what you can actually do on the web today and what is not actually ready yet.
Yeah, this is like back in the day when HTML5 was just, you know, a big dream, and they had those websites like, oh, Opera now supports it, but Chrome doesn't.
Yeah, something like that, but in a high level overview of features.
Absolutely. Well, it was a wonderful presentation. I think we had positive feedback also here in the chat. It was really interesting to listen. I've, you know, definitely check out Max's course on Pluralsight. It's really interesting. He sort of goes deeper into some of the topics he talked about today. And in case people want to find you, where can they reach you? Where can they find out more about what you do?
It's Twitter, FIRT, or in my website, firt.movie. I will paste that in the chat panel. You have a lot of videos from YouTube, from previous talks, books, and courses, links to different courses. So that's like the place where you can find my content.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have the Slack channel set up after this. So for those who want to ask maybe deeper, more technical questions, or even just additional questions that you didn't have a chance to ask here, we can do that. We have another great presentation, Max, from Uriel. And Uriel also says, I found that I don't get any benefits using PWA. I'd just rather use a bookmark. And if I need any notification, I use another type of notification channel. Any feedback for that, or?
No, but that's fine, because I think that's sometimes more of a geeky view. I mean, not the end user. And users want apps, so they want an app installed with an icon in the home screen. So it's kind of they don't think on URLs. I mean, end users. So that's why apps are everywhere. So PWA is but one of the great things about PWA is that you can choose. So you can use the PWA in the browser, or you can install it. And remember that PWA is not just installation. It's also the performance and the offline things that you can get with service workers. And that wasn't available before. Okay, so with Bookmark. So the performance of rendering content locally or serving content locally instead of going to the server for every request, it's something much better.
Yeah, so I mean, it's evolving, it's going to grow, and we're going to see more users adopting it, or even like Chromebooks now using it, which you mentioned as well. So once again, thank you very much. There's going to be a feedback form in the Slack channel for those who are interested in giving a little bit more feedback. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks for joining today. We'll talk to you on Slack. And next time, we're gonna have the meetup with Scott TOLINSKI, and we're going to be sharing more information about that very soon. Once again, Max, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day over in Argentina, and talk to you soon or on Slack.
Okay, perfect. Good night. Take care.